Hi, everybody. Rick DiClemente with StarSelf.com and tonight's episode of Astrology Unplugged. Welcome. Nice to have you with us. If you've not been with us before, we're on, of course, every Thursday at 8 o'clock, but it's usually about astrology, and about once a month or once every 2 months, I have different types of guests who try to keep us interested in different things. Tonight we're going into one of the topics I've never really covered. I've done it in print before, but we're going to talk about the four angles and how important they are in a chart, that being the ascendant. Everything's backward with me. I got to point to my right to be your left. The ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the nadir. These are very, 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 very underrated. They're really, really important. And the more I do astrology, the more I concentrate on just them. They're that important. And they're totally designed by your birth time. Before we get into the angles, I wanted to mention a couple of things kind of interesting. One of the things I noticed today is kind of sad. We've been watching this Pluto return in the United States chart coming for a long time. And I've been hearing from different people here and there that when you go out on the streets, people aren't always real nice anymore. And I wanted to mention that to you. This is something that you're going to have to just expect, because as the Pluto return gets closer and as this goofball in the White House keeps ignoring everything and all the different things that are happening, a lot of folks are feeling, I better watch my chat here. Mute. Oh, there we go. And anyhow, it's all part of the game, and a lot of people are going to be losing it because a lot of people have American exceptionalism at the top, and they just think nothing can happen here. Nothing can happen to us, and it's happening. And that doesn't mean that we can't turn it around, because we certainly can. But I want you to just be aware this is coming down all around. And what usually happens at the top filters down to the bottom. We talk about that a lot. So just take care of yourself and be ready, and also have a little extra compassion for people that are irritable, because people's worlds are falling apart and they don't understand it. They don't understand it. Secondly, I'm going to tell you a really neat story. Hello, John. I bought a really nice guitar in 1980, a Guild guitar, a really nice guitar, and I've played it for 40 years, and it's been really fine, good guitar. And I put it to sleep for a while, put it in its guitar case, and I didn't play much because I got older and no one to play with, etc. And as I approached the 40th year, I noticed my son is a very good guitarist and good string player. I noticed that in the past several months, I've gotten back into playing. I took the guitar in, and after 40 years, I took off medium gauge strings and I put on light gauge strings, make it easier to play. I had the frets redone. So the guitar's been reborn. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, no, 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 no. The guitar cannot be reborn at age 40. And I knew I bought the guitar on November 2nd of 1980. I don't know what time. I knew when I bought the guitar. And I became an astrologer in 78. So I should have written down the time. But anyhow, my guitar can't go through a massive rebirth at age 40. It can't be. It has to be 42. Why? Because Uranus is opposite Uranus at age 42. Same with human beings in midlife crisis. Same with guitars. Same with relationships. Same with countries. Same with anything that's 42. So I've been sitting here suspecting all these years, and I know I bought it November 2nd, 1980, which makes it 40 years old. So the other day I happened to get curious, and I went to the Guild website and I looked up the serial number, and it showed you all these different series, where they were built and all that. And lo and behold, by following the serial number, I nailed it down to 1978. So the guitar is 42. And that's why the Uranus is opposite Uranus, and that's why it's going through change. Now, what that means is with a guitar, you could ignore it and it would probably start cracking, or it gets reborn. Just like people at 42, you either are reborn or you start to crack. 42 really is the age of, am I being myself in my relationships? Because Uranus is opposite Uranus. It has a seventh house quality to it because it's opposite itself. So that's why age 42 is so important. And my most popular video out of all these, I got about 300 out there now. Our most popular video is called Uranus Stages. Something like 3,500 people have watched it. It describes to you Uranus's path, 84 years, 7 years per sign, 21 years per quadrant, age 42, age 21, age 42, age 63, age 84. It's a really good video I recommend to you if you want to understand those stages. Anyhow, so I thought that was kind of neat, and that just shows you the life of an astrologer watching things like guitars or garages or people or marriages or whatever. So to me, it's just the same as watching a person. I'm enjoying it very much. The guitar sounds better than it's ever sounded. I'm trying a whole different method. I'm playing it differently than I ever did before, and I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of been reborn, come to life. Now, if you have questions about what happened to you at 21, revolution from the family, it's 42, revolution from other people, 63, revolution from your job, 84, revolution from your whole incarnation. 84 is a big deal. I suggest you type in Rick DiClemente into YouTube and search for Uranus stages. You'll probably be very shocked to see what happened to you and all the people and things around you in 21-year intervals. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about angles. It's something that I have found through the years become more and more and more and more and more important. They're not taken seriously enough in the beginning days, and it's a shame. You see, in the beginning days, just by nature, you have to teach about the houses, and you have to teach about the aspects, and people need to learn this stuff. But when you start to really do a lot of astrology, it comes down to looking at the angles. Let me explain to you what an angle is. All right. In this video, or in this, let me get back here. Okay. In this graphic, all right. In all charts, the midheaven is what's above you. It's also called the MC, for medium coeli. And you notice at the bottom, these are Latin terms. Medium coeli, imum coeli. They're MC and IC, they're called. This is also called the nadir, or the bottom. It's called the nadir, or the imum coeli, or the IC, which means the bottom, what's beneath me, what's above me, the midheaven or the MC. Okay, these are the four angles. Okay, this is the ascendant and that's the descendant. Now, it's real important that you get this idea. Okay, in astrology, and there's a lot to this, there's no easy way to teach this in a linear fashion. In astrology, the ascendant, I'm putting my hand to my right, and it's going to look to you like it's on my left, so that's okay. The ascendant and the descendant is actually what planets were visible. It's the horizon. So in your chart, if you got your birth time, that was what's up above was visible, unless the sun is out. And the sun, if it's shining, usually you can't see other planets. Sometimes when the sun is setting, you can see Venus. Sometimes you can see the moon, Jupiter, sometimes. Most of the time, if it's above the angles, it's daytime. And everything below has not risen yet. And in astrology, I got to go backward here. The whole chart turns once per day in a clockwise. Let's see this. The chart turns in a counterclockwise fashion. Every 2 hours, a new sign. Every 2 hours, a new sign. That's why they say what sign is rising. So when you look at a chart like today, I better get my astrology software running. Look at the chart right now at this moment. All right, let's take a look at this. So many buttons to push, it gets confusing. Where did that go? All right, let's try this again. There we go. There's the planets right now. Okay, as of right now, you see the sun has risen and the sun is about to set. Okay, the sun has risen as we speak. Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter have just risen above the horizon. This is the east in astrology. This is the west. If it were above us, the sun, it would be noon. If it were below us, it'd be around midnight. These are the four angles, and they're not always perpendicular. The ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the nadir. Okay? Yes, you have these other houses in the middle, and we'll get to that in a minute. These other 8 houses. All right. In astrology, the ascendant is the beginning of the first house. Always for everybody. It's on your left-hand side. It's always on your left-hand side. It is the ascendant for everybody. It's also called your rising sign because it intersects the zodiac. The zodiac keeps turning, and about every 2 hours, the zodiac moves, but the first house never changes. And that's because it's an illusion. What's really happening is the Earth is in the middle and the Earth is turning, and it makes it look like the whole zodiac is moving. So the house system, the angles, are relatively non-changing. Everybody's first house is over on your left-hand side between 8 and 9 o'clock. Everybody's 10th house is up near the top. Everybody's 4th house is near the bottom. All right, now let's talk about why. Now this was discovered, and this is really amazing. It's one reason I call the zodiac so exquisite, because it really means magical, because it's unbelievable. It's self-adjusting. It's self-relative. It's really big words. Hello, Nenda. Hello, Susan. They're all sneaking up on me. We're putting demerits. Susan was late. Lynn is always late. Two demerits tonight. Okay. The ascendant or the rising sign is the same thing. So in astrology, in basic ways of talking, the 3 most important things are your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. Now, since I've given a lot of thought to the last several years, the rising sign is kind of debatable. It's a really tough subject. I'm not going to get into it very much. It's just mainly how you see the world, how the world sees you. For instance, you might be a dry old Capricorn, but have Sag rising. People might see you and see you as much more fun. They get to know you, you're much more serious. Or you might be a Sag with Capricorn rising. You've all seen people who look real serious. You get to know them and they're real life of the party. So the rising sign has a lot to do with how you appear. It's your window to the world. There's a lot to these 4 angles. All right, now, the ascendant and the descendant, and they always talk about the descendant being the beginning of the 7th house, and it always has a Libra quality because that's the 7th sign. Okay, well, I have learned that the 7th house in a chart, let me get this straight here. As we've all seen in astrology, the seventh house is always looked at as the area for marriage and relationships, and it really is important for that. The reason why, and this is all covered in great detail in my book, The Exquisite Zodiac. The first six signs, but in this case, the first six houses, have to do with internal mechanisms, whereas the last seven have to do with external. So once again, the seventh house has a lot to do with marriages, but I'm finding more and more that it has to do with all your relationships, with dogs, with the car, with all people, with books that you have relationships with all these things. The seventh house, I'm learning more and more, has a lot to do with your personal stance, the persona that you want to give off to the public. And I see a lot of people with transits coming through here, planets come through here, and yeah, they get married, they get divorced, and they change their ways with other people. But one of the main things that does happen when planets go into the seventh house is they change their persona, their public persona. Now, likewise, when planets come into the first house, it is said, it's hard to understand this, that this point right here, that point is where life enters the body. This is complex. This is where life enters the body. So the ascendant is really, really critical. So once again, self, other, me plus you. But one of the things that we don't understand correctly is what the seventh house is really about. The seventh house is not really about marriages and relationships. The seventh house is the opposite of the first house. Who am I? First house. Who am I? Seventh house. Who am I when I'm with you? Who am I when I'm with you? So that's why it's kind of a misnomer when you read all this stuff through the years, Libra, relationship. It's kind of true, but it's more true to say that Libra gets a lot of its own identity adjusted, enhanced by its relationship with the other. That's why Libra is all about bouncing back and forth. And who was the great of all time? Johnny Carson. I mean, he was sitting there at that desk and he was relating to all kinds of people, very flexible. So the seventh house has got to do with me and my sounding board. I'm not going to go much further with this. Now, we're going to get into many different sides to this. The nadir, the bottom of the chart, is really heavy duty. It's the beginning of the fourth house. It is the following things. It's very lunar because that's the fourth house, which is like the fourth sign. Cancer. My mama, my grandma, the property, the traditions of the family, my role in the family, my property, my lineage. Your fourth house is real important when you talk about your ancestors. Big deal, big deal. The midheaven at the top. The midheaven is usually two things. One, in America, it's almost always your job, your career. What happens in that area, the beginning of the 10th house, usually becomes very public. So when planets get there, people are going to find out. But more importantly, the 10th house is really your calling back to God. But you can see how far off we are in America, really. Because everything's God, everything's money. How much that worth? How much that worth? Did you get that? How much that worth? Did you get that? Look in there. How much that? What's that worth? Wow. That is America. And that's not what an astrology chart's about. Astrology chart doesn't know what money is. Astrology is the state of the soul. You're either away from God or you're going back. So for the few things that happen at the midheaven, they can go away to seminary, they can go to a convent, they can go to an ashram, they can change your faiths. It's what calls you. So where you been? What calls you? Where you been? How did you grow? What calls you? Who am I? Who are you? Who am I? What are we? That's the basis of an astrology chart. There's nothing more important in the chart than the four angles. And I just read the final book, which I thought was the final book, but he wrote another one, the final book by Arroyo. And Arroyo spends a lot of time talking about the four angles. And I've learned from him that he's exactly right. So when I see a planet floating somewhere and it's square to the ascendant, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. I don't care what sign it's in. If there's a planet square to the ascendant, you are like that planet. You bet on it. If there's a planet trine to the ascendant, you're a lot like that in a very positive way, etc. Now, here's what's intriguing. Take a look at this graphic. Okay. All right. The ascendant and the nadir, and the descendant and the midheaven. Now, the houses are simply dividing points in this line here. This has to divide up into thirds. This quadrant is really about the self, and the book talks a lot about these four quadrants. This is about the self, the pieces of the self. This is about the pieces of the self being put together. This is about relationships, me plus you, and this is about me plus everybody else. Me and my stuff, me getting integrated, me and my partners, me and the rest of the world. And where do we divide these lines up? Where do we divide these lines up? Okay, that's a good question. And that is why in astrology, you'll see this. Whatever system you're using, whether you're using solar fire like I do, or whether you're using astro.com, whatever, when you do a chart, let's get you in here. Let's get you in here. Too many buttons. Okay. All right. All right. When you do a chart, it asks you what house system you would like. And the main house systems in astrology are the one I use is called Placidus. There are others such as Campanus, Coke, Meridian, Placidus, different ones, Regio, Montanus. Now these are the names, different ways to do it. These are the names of very popular and important mathematicians at that time, either philosophers, astronomers, or mathematicians, Greek, Roman, whatever. There was one that was called Placidus, who I like his system, and it's a method of dividing up those other quadrants. You got four pieces of pie. How are you going to divide up each piece? Because each piece has to be divided into three pieces. Are you going to divide them up by time? Are you going to divide them up by space? Or are you going to divide them up by a mixture? So the Coke system is very popular. Placidus is the most popular. Coke is probably next. Some people use equal houses, where all the houses are 30 degrees. You've noticed all along in my systems, all my houses are always different sizes. They're different and they're all accurate. They all mean something. And in one system, I might have the sun in the fourth house, if I'm using Placidus. If I'm using Coke, it might be in the fifth house. And the people argue and argue and argue, but what they really find out is they're both accurate. They're both telling you something different. So you see in astrology, okay, here's a Placidus system. This is exactly what would have happened in Pittsburgh a few minutes ago if a child was born. This would be their chart forever. The sun had risen, the sun was setting, the person would be a Leo, they would have a moon in Virgo, they would have a rising sign of Capricorn with three very big planets rising, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. Okay, now I'm going to tell you this. There are several, and you can talk to my former students. My former students, I've only had them engrave one thing in their forehead all these years. I had them all get chisels out and engrave one thing in their forehead. They still don't get it. Put it in your forehead. Where is Mars? Always know where Mars is with a chisel, okay? That's how important Mars is. Unless you want to get your butt kicked by surprise, don't watch it. But you better know where Mars is, because he's the agitator. The second thing we're going to engrave in our head, if we have some space left, I got a lot of space. Pay attention to the houses. The 4 angles are everything. When planets are found on those angles at birth time or by transit, they're a big deal. Big deal. Now let's go back to the moment this child was just born. What do we see on the angles? Whoa! Saturn is rising. It's just 3 degrees away. Jupiter has just risen by 4 degrees. Here's the angle right here. 2508 is Capricorn. Pluto has just risen. So this person's heavy duty, this kid. It's got Jupiter rising, Pluto rising, Saturn rising, and Capricorn rising. So this child is not going to be a typical Leo. Just by that one fact, planets on the angles are that big of a deal. Is there something square to the ascendant? Yes, there is. Eris. Look at Eris at 24. She's squaring the ascendant at 25. So this person is going to be very Erisian. Eris squares Pluto. Eris squares Pluto, Saturn. Eris squares Jupiter. So you're going to have a hellacious kid on your hands that was just born. Okay? It can be good. It can be bad. Still, that's your first house. That's your 4th house. That planet's not close enough. This planet's having a big impact. This planet is out of sign. This sun is not in Cancer. It's in the next sign of Leo, but it's 6 degrees away. So it's 6 degrees. It's conjunct enough, close enough to the descendant to make that sun very big, very powerful, but it's out of sign. It's not in the same sign. Nothing up here. You got Scorpio, midheaven, but nothing. Now I want to show you something here, which is interesting. Let me see. If I get this on the right screen. Okay, let me see. How do I spell that? All right, I want to go to Quala Quattro. Okay. Okay, here's a friend of mine. I want you to look at her chart. She's a Pittsburgher. Look at this chart. This woman was born in Oslo. This is another normal chart, and the reason it looks so cockeyed is because you got the Earth is already tilted 23.5 degrees, and then you got the spinning of the Earth like this. It just so happens during certain times, her first house is almost square to itself. It's so huge. Look how big. And look how tiny these other houses are. Okay? Look how big this is. So what I'm telling you is with the Placidus system, it says Placidus right there. With the Placidus system, I'm not going to go into great trigonometry details, but what's happening is somebody calculated what was above them, and that point was above them. Doesn't look like it, but it was. What was below, what was to the left and the right, okay? And then Placidus came along with his formulas to create the beginning of the second house, the beginning of the 3rd house, by time or by space. So in other words, it would take the sun the same amount of time to go through this great big house as it does through this little tiny one. So that's all you need to know for now. So when you're starting, I suggest you start with Placidus, and through time, as you get charts, you want to experiment, see what your chart would look like in Coke or some of the other systems. Some of the really famous astrologers use Regiomontanus, Campanus, there are many different ones. So what those house systems mainly do is give you the beginning of the second, therefore the eighth, gives you the beginning of the third, therefore the ninth, the beginning of the fifth, therefore the 11th, and the beginning of the sixth, and therefore the 12th. That's how the houses are. And even though her chart looks all cockeyed, it's mainly because she's up near the North Pole in Oslo, Norway. So we're not going to get into the other, what does the second house mean? What does the third house mean? We're going to talk about the main angles. 1, 4, 7, 1, 4, 7, 10. All right. Those 4 angles are just like the wooden pieces of, do you remember the old wooden strips that you made when you made a kite when you were a kid? And you put the little thread through them and you hang the whole kite's up. It's like a triangle. It's like a kite shape, of course. It's got a tail on it. That's what the angles are to a chart. They're that important. And I'm telling you, you could have somebody with 6 planets in Scorpio, and they could have so much going on their Gemini ascendant that you wouldn't even sense that they're heavy at all. We saw that with John last week. We saw John had a lot of Gemini and a lot of Scorpio and Pluto because of his planet's placement near the ascendant or near the angle. So once again, when a planet is found on an angle, it becomes amplified. Okay. Now, I want you to get this. The birth time determines that, because here's why. I got to write this down. Write this down. What am I talking about here? It's tough getting older, man. I can't remember all this stuff. Okay, shuttle. All right. All right. There's a lot of debate about astrology, of course. Now, when you are born, let's say Marcia was born on December the 29th. So when we took an arrow, and she's born, frees the universe, and we put an arrow through the sun, and it went all the way out to the constellation. This is not true, but this is close enough, and I'm not going to confuse you why it's not true. But for our purposes, pay attention. She's born December 29th, it's winter time. It's in the first 10 degrees Capricorn. You put an arrow through the sun, it goes out, intersects the constellation of Capricorn. Okay? We don't know what that means. But when she was born, was she facing the sun? Was she sideways to it? Was she this way to it? Or was she the reverse, looking that way? 4 different meanings. That's why the angles. Which way were you facing? And every 2 hours, the Earth is turning. So as the Earth turns, you're facing here. 12 hours later, you're facing there. Okay. Now, I want you to follow this one. This is when your head falls off. You see how astrologers bug everybody. What's the birth time? What's the birth time? I mean, it's our holy grail. What if you were born on a space shuttle on your way back to Earth? You would have to draw a whole new chart. It would work. You would have an Earth in the chart. And you wouldn't have a space shuttle on the chart because the space shuttle would be in the center. But if that shuttle were really rapidly turning, you would have to know exactly what position that shuttle was in at the moment of birth, because that would change where you look at the planets. How's that? Thank God that ain't going to happen for a long time. But that's true. That person on a space shuttle, every few seconds would the rising sun be changing because it's spinning. So we don't want to go there. All right. Now, in an astrology chart, we want to go here. I'm not going to pay attention to the Oslo chart anymore. This is a chart of somebody just born. This is where the planets are now. Okay, the fact that these houses are all irregular shapes or varying numbers of degrees of the zodiac, because the zodiac's out here, is because the Earth is tilted. And it's not just tilted on its axis, it's tilting away from the sun or towards the sun, right? So here in summertime, it's starting to point almost exactly towards the sun. So when the chart is done accurately, you come up with all the 12 houses mathematically. And we used to do all this by hand with a pencil. I'm trying to make y'all feel bad. But it made you smarter because you understood how the chart was constructed. You could look right away, tell if a chart's wrong. Okay. So here's Saturn coming out of the first house. In a few minutes, Saturn will rise and go into the 12th. So the planets go through the houses backwards. Don't ask me why, they just do. We determined that the second house starts here. We used to have to calculate this with trigonometry, with whatever algebra to find the exact position for this, and for this, and for that, and for that. Okay. Now, notice how we got a bucket pattern, okay? And the bucket's going to get worse because over the next few days, so you have to understand the movement of the planets. The moon's going to go around once a month. So we've got the bucket here formed, and the bucket's forming. So over the next few days, 3, 4, 5 days, the moon's going to go through here. It's going to become more solo. It's going to become more by itself. So the moon's going to become more important. So therefore, everybody on the Earth is going to be moodier over the next 4 or 5 days than usual. Well, all these planets are hanging out on one half. Every time the moon goes through here, every month, it's a bucket pattern. And a moon out by any planet by itself, separate from the others, is a bucket handle. And it becomes really critical. Now, when you are born with a planet on an angle, it's completely different than when a transit goes into a chart. Like if I'm looking at this person's chart and I see a planet coming along, entering their 6th house, and it's about to enter their 7th house and hit this angle. That's a different story than this person who was born with the sun here. Okay, so in birth charts, the first house is very, very personal. And any planet that's found near the first house is really emphasized. You're a lot like that planet. So you're very Saturnian. If it were Neptune here, you would be very Piscean or very Neptunian because of the planet's rulership of the sign. Now, as a planet is found later in the sign, it gets weaker. So the strongest part of the first house is up here. Strongest part of the second house is up here. Strongest part of the 8th house is up here. So this moon is very strong in terms of its 8th house emphasis, as it would be here or over here, because it gets weaker. So the earlier part of the house is so strong. In fact, planets do have cusps. Signs don't. In other words, people tell you, I'm born on the Libra Scorpio cusp. Wrong, you're not. There is no cusp between signs. You're one sign or you're the other. That's why the diamond is on the cusp, on the cover of that book. They're crisp, demarcated, distinct planes. You're one sign or you're the other. And that sun sign changes within 1 minute, within 1 second. The sun changes from this sign to that sign. And that's amazing to me. How, because the signs are all so different from each other. And the fact that you could change from one to the other so quickly is quantum. It's holographic. It's exquisite. So a person with first house planets, first house is so personal. It's got a lot to do with what the person is like. It's the Aries house. It's so self-oriented, the first house. So any planet that's there, you're a lot like that planet. And the further this planet comes down into the first house, the less you're like that. When a planet is near the fourth house, when a planet is in this area, the next angle, the person picks up very lunar skills. Very lunar. I had one today I'm dealing with. I don't remember what sign was there, but the sun was right there. The sun was wrapped around there. This is like somebody going to the beach and they're wrapping their arms and legs around the pole that holds up the pier. They're just locked in. They want to stay home. They don't want to go out. They want to stay home where it's safe. I don't care what signs are involved. You pick up Cancerian qualities because the fourth house is alike the fourth sign, which is Cancer. So fourth house people have a tendency, it's as far away from the world as possible. They want to stay home. They want to be hidden. They want to be protected by the family, unless the rest of the chart shows something different. Usually they get most of their identity from their family. I'm dealing with a Cancer woman now who has removed herself from over-identifying with the family, and she's becoming more broad, and it's a really good thing because not all cancers can do that. Because some cancers are so attached to family, when they lose family support, they just fall apart completely. That's where their identity is. So it's a very good thing to not put all your marbles in one basket. The seventh house, when a planet is found up here, actually, a planet could be before it. A planet can be before it. This Uranus is too far away, but this Uranus was around 16, 17. It would be close enough that it would be seen as a third house and a fourth house planet. It bleeds over into the next sign. That's why I said to you, house cusps do have cusps, not signs. Houses do have cusps. A planet anywhere from about, I gotta get my eyes on, 23, 24, 21. It's starting to pick up seventh house. When it gets near that line, it's really powerful. When it gets on to the next few degrees, it's extremely powerful. And as it moves on through the sign, it gets weaker. A seventh house person is very Libra-like. They're very social. They pick up Libra qualities. Relationships are really important. I got a friend who has a lot of planets right on that seventh house cusp. And every time I ask her about this, she always tells me, how's the grandson? How's her daughter? How's the husband? And I'm asking, how are you? And then the father and the son, they're doing it. She's so identified with all her relationships. And that can go too far. And often can be problematic. So it can be good in the sense of this person is very social. They're good marriage material. They know how to relate to others. But it's very important for people with a son like this child being born now. This child has to be socially accepted. I don't care what's in that first house. This child is going to have to be socially accepted. And we have Leo sitting here. Okay? And Leo doesn't have to do anything because Leo makes their own rules. But I know right away by looking at the chart, things I know, the person has to be socially accepted because it's near that angle. When a planet's up here, they have to be worldly accepted. They need to be out in the world, nice banking job, nice doctor, lawyer job. When it's a couple degrees from the 10th house or in the 10th house, then we start to see the need for public acceptance. The person's emotions or their home, the person and their ability to have relationships, the person and their ability to succeed publicly. That's what the four angles tell you in one way. All right. When I look at a chart, I immediately zoom in here, 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 here. Then I'm looking for what's squaring the ascendant. What's squaring the ascendant? And boy, it's a big deal what's squaring the ascendant. It's a big deal. Okay. So you can see already that each week we're seeing how the sun sign is just less and less important. Sun sign has its place, but we're seeing more and more and more reasons why charts can be so different from each other because of these house placements. Okay? Wonder where the dock is tonight. We don't have any sign from the dock. I'm going to talk to you now about transits, and transits are really important because through your life you just learn more and more and more by watching people what happens when a planet comes into these houses and goes through the house. And everybody's different, and it depends on which planet it is, what sign it's in, how long it's going to be there. Is it hitting something? Is it opposite something? Is it at a right angle to something? This is why we don't have many astrologers. Too many damn questions. It's just the way it is. All right. Peter H says, nice. Hi, Peter. Okay. When a planet comes into here, here's a real good example. Almost every time somebody has Saturn cross into their first house, what that means is they've been in the first house, second house, they've been in a 28-year cycle, and Saturn is finally finishing, starting over in the first house. Almost always, and I'm talking about 9 times out of 10, that person will start lifting weights, they'll start dieting, they'll start worrying about their body shape. Almost always when Saturn hits the first house. You can take these notes if you want to, but it's more important that you get the idea behind these things. People start taking their appearance importantly, and Saturn, anytime Saturn is anything, you're in danger of a health problem. That's just what Saturn does. Saturn crimps things. So you have to watch out, because if you're not feeling good and Saturn's getting close to an important thing, you better go get some rest. Don't push it when Saturn's around. Now, as Saturn goes through that first house, we're going to pick up a whole pattern that's unbelievably accurate. And I've watched this for many years. This was given to us by an astrologer named Mark Robertson. He's deceased now. Mark Robertson in the 70s. You apply this to your own chart, you'll be amazed, and do all your friends and family too. This quadrant is the quadrant of obscurity. When Saturn comes to this point, remember, Saturn has been through all 12 houses for 28 years. When Saturn gets to this point, all of a sudden, you're nobody. You're in Never Never Land. The old self is gone. You're not interested anymore. You've left it behind. The new self, you don't have any idea yet. You're in Never Never Land, and that's why you start to rebuild. Now, have you ever noticed in the movies, you watching a movie and you go, oh, that guy, I haven't seen that guy in a long time. Where's he been? That's exactly where he's been. That'll even actually help you predict what his rising sign is. If some actor just reappears, you know that his Saturn has been going through his first quadrant for 6, 7, 8 years, because it can bend a little bit. So when Saturn comes into that first quadrant, you don't know what you want, so you start to rebuild. And you can apply this to yourself. You can go outside your house cusp and put the year, write down the year that these planets were there, and your mouth will fall open when you see how accurate this is. And I've been through this thousands of times with my clients, and it's usually really true, unlike some other things. Okay, so as Saturn goes through this quadrant, in the first house, you're rebuilding the body. It goes into the second house. Almost always, you're concerned about your money, but more importantly, you're starting to rebuild your self-worth. As I told you, the second house is, and I think most of the houses are misunderstood. The second house is about self-value. Taurus is about value. What's it worth? So when the second house gets transited, especially by Saturn, you start to, don't mess with me. I'll contain my own self-worth. Thank you very much. I'll form my own values. Then what's happening is a new self is being born unconsciously as Saturn goes through the 7 or 8 years of obscurity. This is the period of obscurity. When Saturn goes into the third house, I had one today like this, and it was the main point in the chart. And I kept telling her, you're about to launch. You're about to go out in the world and do a lot, but you're not ready yet because you need all this mental work. Saturn's going through her third house. And I could tell her how long it's going to be. Saturn's about 28 months per house, unless the house is real distorted. This is about 2 years right here. Third house of the mind. This is time for you to reconstruct your mind. Now, when Saturn hits the bottom, the nadir, this is a big deal. I'm going to tell you why. Big deal. Big, big, big deal. The number one reason why is Saturn has gone through the period of obscurity. It's been coming down. Now it's going to start on its way up. So when Saturn hits that nadir, it's a real big deal because all of a sudden the oven door pops open and you go, ready, I'm ready. And all of a sudden the person stops messing with their head, they stop analyzing their navel, and they know what they want to do. Pop, I know what I want to do. Crisp, clear. Saturn hits the nadir, and you look up at the midheaven, and that midheaven is 14 years away. But Saturn's going to take 14 years to get there. Now, I'm harping on Saturn, but by doing, you're going to be learning about how the angles work. So when Saturn hits the nadir, you automatically know what you want to do in a broad sense, and it's conditioned by the sign that's enveloping the midheaven. If Aquarius is there, you want to go out. Boy, 14 years from now, I really want to attain this height, and I want to culminate and really help people maybe in the environment. Well, maybe if Libra's there, well, 14 years from now, maybe I want to get married, whatever. Maybe I want to do research, whatever. So you start to watch Saturn going through the next quadrant. Okay, now before I leave this point, I want to put in some caveats. Saturn at the nadir is extremely dangerous. Okay? Many people die when Saturn hits that point. Don't worry if yours is there, because many people get right through it. But if you're not feeling good and Saturn's approaching the nadir, you had better get some serious doctor looking at you, because it's very dangerous, because the nadir is the end of the matter. The 8th house is the end and the beginning, the end and the rebirth. But the 8th house is the end. Okay? I mean, the 4th house. It's the end, Saturn's at the bottom. So you don't take lightly what happens there. Now, another thing, I've seen so much of this, is unbelievable. You have to quit your job in San Francisco to go take care of a dying parent in Kentucky. It just happens, it's karmic, and it's common. When Saturn hits that nadir, you got to go move in, or they got to move in from Kentucky over to San Francisco. It's really, really common, because you're getting, the 4th house is the ancestors, your dues to your family, the position you play with your family. This is why it's so important when Saturn hits that 4th house. Okay? Another thing I see a lot, watch this. This is really common, and I think this is really good to understand. When Saturn or Pluto are going through here, one of the things that's real important is the country or the person sitting has to reconstruct their basis. All of a sudden, they get wobbly footing, and they want to build their life because they're looking at their next 14 years, and you can't build your life on rocky soil, on chips, stone chips. So it's real common that they have to, you even go to these people's houses and they'll be digging out a whole new foundation, putting a whole new one in. And they'll think, well, that's funny. Well, see, what's funny to me is astrology's first, foundation second. I don't look at it the other way. That, oh, you're doing the foundation. I mean, of course you are. And the fact that you are doing it is good because you're in touch. So things start to crumble, especially when Pluto gets to the 4th. You go downstairs in the basement, you put up with that. You go downstairs in the basement, you put up with it. You go downstairs in the basement, you go one day, we can't keep doing this. We need sweeping changes. And you haul everything out, and Pluto pours a whole new foundation. That's how important the nadir is. A lot of times I have clients where the foundation is going through all this change and they start to realize, I can't be what I want to be from this house. I can't be what I want to be with my role that the family keeps shoving me back into. So the fourth house is your basis, whether it's emotionally, whether it's the actual building, whatever it is. So I think you got an idea. So it's deadly in the sense that here's why it's deadly. And I finally found out through Dane Rudhyar, through reading here, I finally figured out why. And he says, here's what he says, and it's really accurate. When we see Saturn coming up here, victory, you're on top of the world. You're with groups and you're sharing your victory. You're famous, you're popular for 5 years. Saturn starts going through the 12th house. Almost everybody starts to give up. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired of doing it. I paid my dues. I don't want to do it anymore. And I'm talking about everybody you talk to. This Saturn cycle is really accurate. By the time you let go, Saturn here, you're empty. That's why I call it Never Never Land. You're not with that. You're not with this. You're just starting over. The start-finish line. So you start to rebuild the self. You start to rebuild your money and your foundation. You start to rebuild your value system. You start to rebuild your mind. Pop, opens the door to the oven. Here you come. You know that you got a new goal. You know it's a Scorpio goal. So you know it's going to be something meaningful. Scorpios are about, I want a job that means something. And you get past any dues here. I got to take care of mom and dad with the rest home or whatever. You get past that. Then you start on your way back up. And it's laborious. And this quadrant is tough. This is the tough quadrant because this is the Cancer, the Leo, and the Virgo quadrant. So it starts to move. So you can see that in the fourth house, it's you fixing your emotions, fixing your emotional nest, fixing the family, putting the family in their place, whatever. Now, I will say one thing about the sixth house, because there are some things that just always happen. They're just like Susan's always asking me for formulas. Well, this is one you can write down. When Saturn crosses into the sixth house, remember, it depends on what house system I'm using. When it goes into the sixth house and it goes through here, it's preparing to go into the seventh house. So one of the really common things that happens when Saturn goes into the sixth is you start to develop a new work skill. And usually it's very practical, the MBA program, etc., because it's the Virgo house, sixth house, and you start to feel not ready for it because Virgos don't take anything cheaply. They work for everything they earn, right? So you're getting ready for a new position in the world, seventh house. So don't be surprised if you look at your chart when Saturn's gone through your sixth house, you'll see it. Saturn goes into the seventh, now you're out in the public again. Now, what I was going to tell you, I forgot, I got off track. Imagine that. What Dane Rudhyar told me when I was studying him, the reason Saturn can be deadly in the fourth house, it depends on what you did with this. Depends on what you did right here. How well did you let go of the old? Remember, you were going through an old cycle for a long time and you started to give it up. But when you give it up, you don't just give it up like Americans do. You give it up like the American Indians did. They show honor to the old. They show honor, they put it to bed. They learn from the past. So Rudhyar tells us that how well you put the old cycle to bed, honoring it, is relevant when we look at how well you build the new. So that is all determines how healthy this transit is, Saturn coming through the fourth. Because you're now starting back up. It's hard work, but it's starting back up. You're starting to work. You're getting your new skill set, and you go now into the seventh. In the seventh, you might get married. You might see people that never wanted to ever get married. All of a sudden, they got to be married. That's very common with Saturn here. So when Saturn starts into this quadrant is easier than this one, but it's still no breeze, because this is the quadrant where you have to settle all the stuff with people. And if your people skills aren't good, when Saturn goes to the 7th and the 8th, well, guess what happens? You're going to have a lot of hassles with people, and it all comes back to you on how well are your people skills, your Libra skills. Okay, so as you see, we're starting now to get to our culmination point 14 years later. So now we go back to share the screen again. Now as Saturn comes into the 9th house, which is colleges, travel, etc., governments, it's very, very common when Saturn is this area, you go back to school. Now, if it's Saturn, you go back to a school with 4 pillars. If it's Uranus, you go back to a school over the internet. Depends. If it's Neptune, maybe you go to a school down by the beach. You have to put all things together. Like John's background. John's in the 9th house in Neptune land because he's got palm trees behind him. Okay, so this has all been getting ready for a new look, a new role, now getting ready to take a new place in the world, and now you finally start to culminate. And when you look at yourself, you will see that you have been at your high. You have been at your high, job-wise, worldwide, 14 years after you were ready. You'll see this. This is when you just became ready. It's nothing you think about. It just all of a sudden, you're ready. So when Saturn comes through here, you become very public. You get all kinds of awards, or else you get a lot of flack. You get all kind of public recognition, etc. You take all that with you into groups and associations for generally a 5-year period, and then you start to decay again. You start to let it go and start to let go of the old, start anew. So it's very good, a good learning tool for you to put your chart on paper and write down the years that Saturn was at this angle. Saturn was at that next cusp. Saturn was up here. Don't worry if it's exact, just get it approximate. And you'll start to see, boy, I was working on that, and I was working on that. It's very, very intriguing. Okay. Now, a couple other things that are really intriguing. This is amazing, this one. This is probably about 1 out of 3 people I know that I read for. When Mars is coming by, let's take a look at Mars. Remember, on your brain now, you always know where Mars is, and pay attention to the houses. We now have 2 things up there. When Mars comes here, it dips down into the 12th house. Remember, this is the area of enemies that you know you have. This is enemies you don't know you have. They're secret. You don't know. You might not have any enemies. That's why it's only 1 out of 3. Enemies you know, enemies you don't know. But so many times, Mars will go here and their enemy will go behind their back. And they'll ask me who it is. And I'll say, I can't tell you, it's unknown. But I can tell you when you're going to find out. And it's amazing to watch Mars come across the ascendant. Almost a day before, 1 degree before Mars is 24, all of a sudden they realize this Aries person, ruled by Mars, this Scorpio person, ruled by Mars, has been working behind their back. And you find out what they've been doing while Mars has been back here. Very, very common. So, like I said, 1 out of 3. So 2 out of 3 people I've talked to about this said no. But unbelievable, some people, it's really accurate. And they always ask you who it is. And you always tell them, I don't know. If it's unknown, it's unknown. Okay. And in actuality, to get a little deeper, you're not going to have somebody working behind your back out to hurt you unless you are. That's what I found. If your saboteur is strong and healthy and out to get you, the odds go up to somebody else's too. So when we look back up now and we look at the houses and we look at how the angular houses are so strong, the ascendant rules this whole quadrant. It's about the self. These first three houses, or the first three signs of the zodiac, are about the self, the stuff the self's made of. The next angle. And remember, the four angles correspond with the four cardinal signs: Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. That's why the zodiac, another reason that it's exquisite. It's just self-balanced. Saturn gets, or a planet gets to this area where the fourth house activity has to do with, the area has to do with development, putting the self together. We get the pieces. Now, how do we put it all together? Because we're doing all this because we're going to go meet people. We're going to go socialize. But in actuality, what a chart really is we're going to go mythically and try to leave God so we can have our own experience and hang on to how clever we are and how unique we are. And in actuality, at the end of the story, in the 12th house for the 12th sign, is when we return, the prodigal son. We return back to the Godhead. We return back to Godness. And we give up this silly illusion that we've been out there and we've been separate. So that's what the angles are. The self being put together, the self in relationships, my relationship, my deep relationships, sex, lust, my relationships with other countries, governments, philosophies. Then we go over to cardinal again, my place in the world, my responsibility out in the world. So I think what we're going to do now, since it's such a big topic, I want to open up the phones to this topic. I want to remind you, YouTubers, if you ever want to join us on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, just go to starself.com. That's my website, starself.com/unplugged. And that will give you the link to use Zoom to get into this live audience. Other than this is recorded every Thursday night and put up on the internet on YouTube on Thursday nights. So I didn't want to bombard you with too much, but it's really important to reiterate, when planets are crossing these angles, or planets are found there, it's the same thing, when you're born, they're a big deal. And this is why some people have outrageous qualities and you can't figure out. You look at their sun sign and it got nothing to do with their sun sign. Some people have outrageous qualities. If the person's really thick and intense and maybe somewhat threatening or really sexy, Pluto's sitting somewhere on one of the angles. If the person is magical and divine and dreamy and poetic, you can't understand it. Or you look at Audrey Hepburn, her beauty, and where's this otherworldly beauty coming from? Neptune's near an angle. See, when a planet's on an angle, it has like a direct impact on you. It really is a big part of you. When the person's all electric and buzzing and quick and genius-like, Uranus is there. Look at Tesla. Tesla was a Cancer. So it wasn't Cancer. Tesla had Pluto right on the ascendant. Right on the ascendant. That's the only way you can access these big energies, is they have to be on an angle. They're floating out in the middle of the second house, eighth house, fourth house. They don't have that much power. So what matters is when natal planets are found on these angles. That's one way you could tell right away what planets are there for that person. So I want to talk now. I don't want to get lost in stuff. If you would like to open your mic, you can do so and ask a question about the angles, whether it's an angular natal thing or an angular transit. And I'd be glad to entertain your questions. Who's it going to be first? Who's it going to be second? Who's got the question rising in their head? Peggy's ready to go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a question. I have a person who has natal Saturn, Jupiter conjunct on their nadir.
And the nadir?
Yeah, on the nadir. And Saturn is now hitting it. And yes,
Saturn return.
They're dealing with their mother and father. They're looking at their job as wanting to retire in a few months. But does the Jupiter make it easier when it's...
Hold on, that's a tough question. So the person's around 58.
Yes.
Okay, now you made the question double hard because you put Jupiter with it.
Well.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Saturn and Jupiter at the bottom, right?
Right there on the nadir.
And they're on the nadir.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So first of all, we know the person has Saturn on the nadir. Yeah. Natally. So we know, I don't care what the sign is, Aquarius, Aries, this person is really careful emotionally. Yeah. They're just real careful. Because when the fourth house, like for instance, people with Saturn in Cancer. I have a lot of clients with Saturn in Cancer, and I work with them a lot, even recently. And I tell them, you're afraid somebody's going to get in and get you. Why? I don't know. They're just going to get you. Oh, you better be careful. Don't let them come in and get you. Well, you got to stop and look at Saturn in Cancer and just say, okay, come on in. What are you going to do to me? What? Come on in. That's how you deal with it. So people with Saturn in Cancer come from a previous life where maybe they were threatened, they had to go to war. Maybe their town was bombed. Who knows what it is? But they're very cautious about their home and all. And yes, I told you, I don't care if you've been floating free for years, when the Saturn comes around and hits that nadir, all of a sudden, Mr. DiClemente, you're going to have to take care of mom and dad. They're here and we have nowhere to put them. And did you have a place in mind? Did you want to pay for that? And a lot of, you see what people go through. You see what people go through. It can be hardship. And then you can see a lot of modern Americans that don't want to do it. And it's really tough stuff, especially if their childhood wasn't good. So what's going to happen with your friend? The Jupiter makes the story really, really complex now because it's down there natally. In my opinion, the Jupiter is going to help somewhat. But you've also got to realize that Saturn's hitting her Jupiter. Her Saturn is hitting her Jupiter. So that's different than your Jupiter hitting your Saturn. So if my Saturn comes along and hits my Jupiter, I'm going to feel, and I'm going to have these types of thoughts, boy, I've been too excessive. I need to tighten my belt. Boy, look at all the waste I did. Look at all the times I put my foot in my mouth. I've been too excessive, and I need to really toe the line more. Those are very natural desires. Opposite. Jupiter comes in its Saturn. It's not going to be as strong because it's faster. Jupiter moves quicker than Saturn. Jupiter comes over your Saturn. All of a sudden you're going, oh, I've been so uptight. I need to just loosen up here. You know, I've been just too careful. I need to let it fly a little bit. So you get the idea. Now, one of the things that happens, because I'm born with Saturn opposite Jupiter, one of the things going to happen to your friend who's got Saturn and Jupiter at the nadir at the same time is, I don't care if they got it there natally or not, these two planets don't get along. They're like Saturn and Uranus. They're the opposite. One's conservation, one's expansion, one's tighten up, one's let go. What the Saturn-Jupiter usually means, it's best if you have the trine, the Saturn-Jupiter trine, then the person has a natural ability to save or spend, save or spend. So this person is going to find that all of these things that they've ever done with their family that had to do with being indecisive, when to be conventional, when not to, she's going to find that all these things are coming to a peak. Okay, and another thing that will probably happen, this is very difficult stuff. She's going to probably insist that the rest of the family start respecting her new role and not try to put her back in the shoebox. There's a lot of families do that. Yeah. And they get this false reasoning. You're my kid and I can do that. Well, no, you can't. No, you can't. So even though it's a time of paying dues, Saturn is always a time of planting your flags and saying, I'm here. This is what I'm going to do. So you gotta watch Saturn, because Saturn will always make you feel dutiful and responsible, and that's its beauty. You're dutiful and you're responsible, but you gotta watch it because it'll make you feel overly like you're responsible for everything and everybody. If that kid's not this person you're talking about, if they're not careful, everybody in the family will start trashing them.
Yes, and they are.
Okay. They are. But the reason why, she's allowing it. See?
But it's getting better.
It's not it's getting better. There is no it. Well, she's getting better.
Yes. Right. Yes, it is happening. Right. They actually lived next door and then moved to get away because they knew that was going to happen.
Well, let me tell you something, Peggy, and this is not going to surprise you. And this is something I'm running into so much today, because I told you there's no more ponies and everybody's got to get on the horse.
Yeah.
That's what's going on now. Okay. Well, I see this a lot, and this is very tough with parents who are going into ALS, parents that are going into mental diseases, dementia. Okay. It's very tough to deal with that, of course. But a lot of what's happening is a lot of people want to keep playing that role with their child because they don't want the responsibility of carrying their evolution anymore. And you see, that's what Pluto's doing now. Pluto is, what did I tell you? Pluto separates you from your support systems if you're not carrying your own part of your evolution. Pluto's about, are you evolving or not? That's what it's about. And I can't overstress, I can't keep telling you. When Pluto, when you work with it and try, it will help you with your evolution. And if you don't try, it will get rid of you.
Yeah, the father had just had his Uranus return. He's 83, broke his hip. He's the one that handled everything. He lives in this big house, doesn't want to move. He's not changing. And I don't know if Pluto's going to really mess him up.
Do you know why he broke his hip? In your main motor, your main motor's your hip, right? The reason he broke his hip with Uranus is because he was denying to take ownership of his own individuality.
Yes,
that's why Uranus cracks ankles, it cracks wrists. It's usually ankles or feet. But that's the reason why, is because it's a motor thing. You're moving forward, you don't want to move forward, but you want to move, but you don't.
Right.
So you got to really be aware of this, because people will put you on the spot. I have a lot of clients say to me, oh, I hate to do this and I hate to divorce this person. We've been married 25 years, but I've been wanting to leave since the 5th year. So you stayed 20 years. You haven't helped that person. All you did was enable them, right? And so it can be very complex. And then, of course, you've got the, I got to see what I'm doing here. Okay. You've got to, you got to take into account the karmic effect. And who in hell can solve that? I can't. What is karmic about this relationship? So thank you. That's a really good question. Thank you very much. Anybody else now with an angle problem, an angle question? Something about your angle that we see Susan has left Cleveland for some cartoon area. I like that. I'm going to have to get one of them for myself. Come on, who's got a question about the angles? The 4 angles, they're really a big deal. They're really important. Marcia Bud, go ahead.
So in terms of the United States right now, with the virus so intense, where is the Saturn right now for the United States? Is it
Well,
at
it's a good
near?
question. Keep in mind now, nobody knows what the angles are for the United States.
They don't?
Okay? Nobody knows what time we're born.
Oh, right. We discussed that recently.
Okay, we think we know. We think we have a working chart with Sag rising. Okay. The important thing about the United States now is Pluto is coming back to where Pluto started from. And the important thing also is that Neptune squaring the king Donald we have, it's squaring his sun and moon same time. That's brutal. In America's chart, Saturn has just gone through Sag, is now in Capricorn, right? So Saturn is now entering the period of obscurity. But remember, these planets like Saturn and Jupiter, they're social planets. They're not intense like the big mamas, like Pluto, Eris, Neptune. Okay? So even though we're going through a period of obscurity and rebuilding, we're still going through the Pluto return. We still got Pluto opposite the sun in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. So in the second house, it's probably in the second house by now. That's indicative that the United States is trying to find its worth. What are we worth? We're not going to let other countries dictate our worth, okay? And money situations. So, in your chart, what do you have rising? Well, you have Chiron in the second house in Capricorn. So Saturn's in your second house. So you've gone into Saturn finishing your 12th, gone into your first, probably around the time you moved. Probably. And you would notice that also, not just the fact that you moved as Saturn was going from 12 into 1, but you probably had about 2.5 year, 28-month period before that where your heart wasn't in it anymore. Your heart wasn't in it. You just wanted to pay the bills and get on, and you're ready to let go of the old life. You'd been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens when Saturn goes through house 12. Come on, who's got questions? Questions. Linda, you're biting your lips so well. Come on, I know you have questions. You have to unmute yourself, though. I always pick on Linda. Hello, Peter.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Good. Go ahead, Linda.
I was actually just looking at my my chart on my iPad, which I often do as we talk. And all I'm going to say about this is that I remember one of the very early sessions we had with my chart when we had class.
Right.
This was maybe 7 years ago,
right.
6-7 years ago. And what I learned that night, I think really stuck with me was how important the angles really are. Because the moon is right on, has just crossed the ascendant in my chart. It's in the first house.
The moon.
The moon.
The moon travels every 28 hours.
Well, all I can tell you is when you look it up, it's right across the ascendant in my first house.
You mean right now?
No, when I was born.
Oh, okay, when you're born. Okay.
When I was born, I'm thinking about, no, right.
Yeah, right, when you're born, yeah.
I was born.
So you're very lunar.
I'm very lunar. And then on the midheaven, I have Mars and Venus on either side. And one's in Leo, Mars and Leo. Oh, that's just such a fun combination. And
I think it's fine.
Well, I mean, it's and then Venus and Taurus on the other side, or Venus and Virgo on the other side. And as I've thought about my chart and kind of try to work with it, when I see these problems coming up or stresses in my life, I can almost always figure out why this one thing is going on, because there's something tweaking that Mars, or there's, like right now I have Neptune square to everything. Neptune is square to everything in my birth chart.
Boy, that's a lot of stuff.
but I'm like, okay, I don't, it just makes me want to, I don't know. It just makes me more mellow. I don't know what it is.
Neptune does. It makes you want to refine your life quieter, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
I mean, so the whole COVID thing is not, it's fine with me because I'm very happy right now just staying home, working on my own routine and getting myself back into, working on those
Well,
things.
what you need to do, all of you need to look at your charts or people close to you. You have to learn. This is how you learn. And write down when Saturn went into this house. And the planet will go in, come out, go back in, use the first time. It'll right the year, just the year Saturn was at your midheaven. The year Saturn was on your ascendant. You'll see so much you won't believe it. And when Uranus was there, it's shake up to this area. When Saturn's there, it's building, and Neptune is there, it's confusion. I'm going to leave you with this because I think it's interesting, and then we'll see.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Every time I turn on the computer and your voice comes on, this cat has got to be right here. I don't know what it is with you and this cat. I mean, I can be doing anything else, but this cat right now is right beside my leg, or she's right up here, or she's right up here, or she's hopping and jumping.
Maybe she wants to see my two cats. Okay, now I told you, thank you for the question. By the way, I think I'm going to mute you. I'm working on getting Dina Patrick, the wonderful woman out of Georgia, or North Carolina, yeah, that works with Wishadu and starts all these organizations. She's on fire these days because things are so bad. I'm really trying to get her on the program if she wants, because I don't bother her. She's hell on wheels. Nice woman too. And also trying to, I got my Healy. There it is. I'm just starting to use it. That little thing does amazing stuff. So I'm trying to get Linda Veras on the show and talking about all the magic of the healing and how it works remotely, doesn't care about distance. Interesting. I want to leave you with two things that happened to me, just to show you how the angles are so critical. And one thing I'm trying to say to you is this: if you're not sure your birth time, and even if you are sure, I mean, I watched my son born, and I had to watch down to 1 second within the atomic clock in Colorado. I knew within seconds. And I went to the wall, and the wall clock was off by 5 minutes. So I changed the wall clock in the delivery room before my son was born and said, it's wrong. Anyhow, so I'm telling you, your birth time could be off by 5-6 minutes. And if you have an event happen in 1971 that's shocking, and Uranus is almost on the angle, well, go ahead and put Uranus on the angle and adjust your chart. And then when you start working that way, that's called rectification. You might see that you're really not born at the time you think you were born. You might be born a couple hours different, or a couple minutes different, or whatever. So that's the value of testing your chart. That's also the value of trying different house systems, as we talked about. But I wanted to leave you with this story, which was kind of unbelievable. Long time ago, when I was married, my ex-wife had tragedy in her family, and she lost both of her parents when she was 17, within 1 year. Tragic, and she took her a while to get out of that. But when Saturn hit the nadir, we know her birth time's right. When Saturn hit the nadir exactly, she broke the spell, got up, and went out to college. Very intriguing, that whole process of new beginning. 28 years later, Saturn hit that nadir exactly on the day she asked me for a divorce. That's how timed these things can be. And that's not something that's unusual as an astrologer, you see. That was no picnic. It was divorce time, and it's worked out okay. But I'm just telling you, today has been harp on everybody about how big of a deal the angles are. So everybody go outside now, walk in between all the little particles, in between all the particles. Don't get any particles on you. See you all next week. Thank you, YouTubers, for joining us. Thank you, Peter, for joining. John, everybody. I'll see you next week at 8 o'clock, and we're going to say goodnight. Thank you.